Good morning, everyone. Today, we dive into two foundational concepts that shape how modern states function: Constitution and Constitutionalism. Every country has a constitution, but not all follow constitutionalism. The distinction is not just academic, it lies at the heart of whether citizens live under the democracy or is it a mere facade. Let's explore these concepts and see how they differ, complement each other, and why both are essential to governance and individual liberty. Now, let us look at the content. First and foremost, I'll go forward with the introduction. Then, I'll discuss what is exactly a constitution. Then, I'll come to constitutionalism. Then, we'll dwell upon differences between constitution and constitutionalism. And then, last but not least, I'll be concluding my lecture. Constitution is a document that talks about fundamental rights, fundamental duties, directive principles of state policy, and it also deals with emergency and amendment procedure and distribution of functions among the three organs of the government: legislature, executive, and judiciary. And foremost, it also deals with distribution of power between the center as well as the state. Constitutionalism is the philosophy that curtails the power of a sovereign and grants individual freedom to the subjects or the people or the citizens. Constitutionalism could be observed during the signing of Magna Carta and also during the approval of Bill of Rights. These two documents curtailed the power of monarch and granted individual freedom to the subjects. Let me illustrate regarding constitution and constitutionalism. Let us suppose that you are making masala dosa. For dosa batter, you use rice, urad dal, fenugreek. For masala, you use potatoes, mustard seeds, onions, curry leaves, and turmeric. Steps: soak and grind ingredients to make the batter. Ferment overnight. Cook dosa on a hot tawa. Prepare the potato masala separately. Combine and serve. This is the blueprint, like the constitution that lays down the institutions, fundamental rights, duties, procedures, federal structure. Without this recipe, you wouldn't know how to make the dish. Just like without a constitution, a country wouldn't know how to govern properly. If you know the recipe, how ardently are you following the recipe? That's where constitutionalism will come into picture. Constitutionalism means following the steps properly, not skipping fermentation to save time, not adding random ingredients like ketchup or chocolate, and using the right tools like a proper tawa. No constitutionalism will imply raw batter, burnt dosa, overspiced or undercooked masala. Just like a country can have a beautiful written constitution, but fall into authoritarianism or corruption if it ignores the principles behind it. Let us understand what is constitution. Elliot Burmer had given a definition for constitution. It is nothing but a document encompassing a set of rules that are binding upon all the members of the state, including the state itself, including the structure and operation of government institutions, political principles, and fundamental rights. Also, the Constitution will talk about emergency provisions, amendment procedures, whether the particular amendment will require simple majority or special majority. In case of special majority, what is exactly the procedure? Constitution is nothing but the supreme law of the land. In Keshavanath Bharati case, it was held that the basic structure of the Indian constitution should not be violated. Sovereign socialistic secular democratic republic, then independence of judiciary, judicial review, separation of powers, all these are a part of the basic structure. Constitution also dwells upon distribution of powers between state and the center. There are mention of fundamental rights as well as fundamental duties. For the violation of fundamental rights, one could approach court. That is nothing but justiciable. A constitution can be written or unwritten. The UK's constitution is unwritten. Their constitution is ever evolving and moreover it is dependent on traditions and customs. Savini once stated that law is like a language, it keeps on growing. UK's constitution also keeps on growing. Savini stated that the last stage in a state should be codification, and until then, none of the laws have to be codified. Constitutionalism talks about limitation of power of a state and it specifies what a government can or cannot do. The government should not transgress from the constitution. John Locke's social contract theory states that a state is a product of social contract rather than divine origin. It is the general will of the people and with the consent of the people that the social contract comes into existence. The citizens have to protect their life, liberty, and property. These are the three natural rights which a person will have in his lifetime. Now, let us discuss the core principles of constitutionalism. The first one is limited government. A good government is the one which governs the least. In India, the president cannot make laws or impose emergency provisions without parliament's approval and constitutional conditions being met. In USA, the government cannot ban free speech because the First Amendment limits that power. Think of a dog on a leash. The leash is the constitution. It allows the dog to move, but within limits to avoid harm. The second principle is the rule of law. Everyone, including the government, is subjected to law. In South Africa, former President Jacob Zuma was sentenced to jail for contempt of court. Even the head of the state was not above the law. In India, the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of Information Act because it violated free speech, holding the government accountable. The law is like a road with equal speed limits for everyone, whether you are driving a bicycle or a BMW. The third principle is the principle of separation of powers. Power should be divided among the three branches of the government to prevent arbitrariness and abuse. In the USA, Congress makes laws, the President enforces them, and the Supreme Court interprets them. In India, Parliament can make law, but the judiciary can declare the acts unconstitutional if they violate the Constitution. This is nothing but the power of judicial review. A three-legged stool, if one leg tries to grow too long, the whole system will collapse. All legs must be balanced and then only can a stool stand properly. That is the same case when it comes to a constitution. The fourth principle is the principle of judicial review. Judicial review is nothing but the power of the courts to strike down laws as unconstitutional. In Keshavanand Bharti case, it was held that judicial review was implicit under the Indian Constitution and the Parliament cannot alter the basic structure of Indian Constitution. Marbury versus Madison case established the principle of judicial review. India followed suit in the Keshavanand Bharti case. Judiciary acts like a referee in a game, ensuring players follow the rules and don't cheat. The fifth principle is fundamental rights. Citizens are guaranteed certain inalienable rights. The fundamental rights are not absolute. The fundamental rights are the ones that have been declared under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Article 21 guarantees the right to life and personal liberty. This has to be interpreted to include rights like privacy as well as right to legal aid. In USA, the Bill of Rights protects freedom of speech, religion and press. Fundamental rights are like shield to every citizen who carries it, protecting them from unfair treatment by the state. Let us now understand the differences between constitution and constitutionalism. Constitution is nothing but a document that specifies the fundamental rights, fundamental duties, and it will also talk about the distribution of functions among the three organs of the government and distribution of power between state as well as the center. Constitutionalism is nothing but an ideology that limits the power of a state and grants individual freedom. If constitution is a mango, constitutionalism will talk about how much of fruit one is eating and how much they're leaving for the other, and how ripe the mango is. And if there is a mango and you want to eat the mango, you cannot ask for an orange. That is basically like transgressing what the constitution mandates. Constitution can be written or unwritten. UK's constitution is unwritten. Constitution will specify the structure of the government, political processes and rights of citizens. Constitutionalism is nothing but the inherent philosophy which keeps the constitution thriving. Constitution sets out the rules and standards which have to be followed to ensure equitable distribution of resources. Constitutionalism will talk about how laws could be applied to achieve these goals. Constitution can be rigid, but constitutionalism will say even though the constitution is rigid and how well it is able to keep with the test of time. It is basically a measuring rod to ensure whether the democracies around the world are functioning properly or not, and whether they are transgressing beyond what constitution mandates. To conclude, constitution gives the structure. It talks about rights, obligations and duties, whereas constitutionalism will talk about the philosophies which a country will govern with to ensure that the rights, obligations and duties are adhered to, and these rights and obligations should not transgress beyond the constitution. If constitution is the mango, constitutionalism will talk about how much of fruit one is eating and how much of seed they are leaving for the other, and also question how ripe the mango is and whether a person is asking for a mango or an orange all alone. If a country is having a constitution, doesn't mean that it is following constitutionalism. Do you think India is following constitutionalism? Are the modern democracies a facade for dictatorship? Do let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening to my lecture on Constitution and Constitutionalism.